All right, we're going to review this test. And I'm going to go through these questions slowly. And in the video, I've got, in the description, I've got links to each question so that you know which one that is, or you can skip ahead as you see me working it out on the screen if there's certain questions you want. So one of the things I'm going to remind us of, most of these are word problems, okay? So we're going to use our strategy of know, find, not needed, and the strategy. So K, F, and S. And the way that works is we're going to look for things that we know. What are the things that we know about the problem? Okay? What is it they're actually asking us to find? And I'll work through these as we go along. What information is not needed at all? Okay, that's just muddying up the waters. And then, what is my strategy? What operation am I going to use? What strategies am I going to use to solve this? Is there an expression that I can use, an equation, that kind of a thing? So we're just going to get started right on with question number 1. So it says, a machine paints 342 toy boats in 45 minutes. What is the unit rate in toy boats per hour? Well, what are the things that I know? And I'm going to go ahead and just use a highlighter for the things that I know. I think I'll use yellow to show the things that I know. So I know that there are 342 toy boats. And that takes 45 minutes to make or to paint 342 toy boats. Say that 5 times fast. So that's what we know. What are they asking us to find? I'm going to show find in green. They're asking us to show toy boats per hour, the unit rate. Okay? So toy boats per hour. Is there information that's not needed? Not really. It's pretty much all needed. So nothing I need to cross out. Okay, what is my strategy? Well, my strategy is going to be, I'll do that one in blue, and we'll do not needed in red. All right, so what is my strategy? My strategy is unit rate. That is my strategy. Well, what do I know about unit rate? I know, let me think. What are unit rates? Let's see, miles per hour, things like that. Oh, they're asking for toy boats per hour. And it's usually represented in a division symbol, right? So if I were to say miles per hour, I would put it like that, which is just miles divided by hours. So we're saying toy boats, and my strategy is I can cross out per and make it a division symbol. So toy boats divided by hours. Well, we know toy boats, okay? That's right here, 342. So let me write that in. 342 divided by hours. Well, we know hours. Oh, no, we don't know hours. What do we know? We know minutes. Well, shoot, how many hours is 45 minutes? Well, there's 60 minutes in an hour. So we know that that is 45 over 60. Well, we could keep it like this if we want, right? Because this is what we know. And this is the simplest way I can do this. So there's a lot of different things I can do. I could do the division problem, and like this, and make it a decimal. And I would know that it would end up being 0.75. I just happen to know that. Or I could keep this the way it is. Okay, there's a couple different ways. All right, so whatever makes sense to you, I'm going to go ahead and keep it, and I'm going to do 45 over 60. All right, so I'm now dividing 342 by 45 over 60. So my strategy is division, okay? And I've got to use another strategy because it's very difficult to divide by a fraction. So I'm going to use my next strategy, keep, change, flip. Okay? So I'm going to start working down here. All right, and then I'll bring it back up there, and we'll erase it in between questions. So 342, I can write it this way. I'm going to rewrite it so that it makes sense to me. 342 divided by 45 over 60. All right. I can use keep, change, flip. Okay. First, 342 is actually 342 over 1. So I'm going to keep it as a fraction. So I know that keep 342. And sorry about the tapping, but that's just because the microphone is in here, it's just going to make tapping noises. I change the division to multiplication. That's my change. So keep, change, flip. I flip the last fraction. Instead of 45 over 60, it becomes 60 over 45. And the reason that this works is division and multiplication are inverse operations. So I'm going to explain a lot right now. For instance, if I cut something in half, this is 1/2, and this is 1/2. All right? So I could take 1 and multiply it by 1/2 to get 1/2, or I can take 1 and divide it by 2. Okay, that's my inverse. See how I flipped it? This is 1 over 2. This is 2 over 1. I flipped it. You see how that works? Because dividing something by 2 is the same as multiplying it by 1/2. So we did our flip. I can multiply straight across if we want. Okay? It starts to get to be a pretty big number. So let's keep looking at it. I'm going to have to make some space, so I'm going to start erasing. Let's just take it up here. Okay. So, my eraser needs to be, I guess that is as big as it gets. Okay. $342 times 60. Okay. Well, 0 times everything's 0. So I'm just going to move on to the next, to the 6. So 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 4 is 24 plus 1 is 5. 25, I should say. And then 6 times 3 is 18 plus 2 is 20. So I have 20,520. Well, we're not done because now I have to divide it by 45. So I take 45 and I do 20520. Right, the decimal place is over here, just in case we need a decimal later. 45 goes into 20 0 times, okay? So 45 goes into 205. That's the one I'm working with right now. How many times? Well, I can kind of round to 50 and get in the ballpark, right? Because that's an easy one I could start doing. So I can do 50, 50, 100, 150, 200. I just counted 4 times. So let's try 4. I could probably do this in my head because 45 times 2 is 90, and 9 times 2 is 18, which would be 180. All right? But I'll do this the long way. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 4 is 16 plus 2 is 18. All right? So I subtract 5 minus 0. 0 minus 8, can't do that, so I have to borrow, right, to make it 10 minus 8 and 1 minus 1. So 25 is what I'm left with. Okay? I'm running out of space. Oh boy. So 25, I bring down the 2. 45 goes in 252. Well, again, I can use my round to 50 trick, and I do 5. Okay? So 5 times 45, that's going to be a different beast. So we go 25, right? 5 times 5 is 25. So then 5 times 4 is 20 plus that, 22. And I'm left with, I have to keep moving on. If I subtract, again, I'm running out of space, but 52 minus 25 is really what I'm looking for, right? I'm not really looking for anything else. And I know that 25 plus 25 is 50, and I could do 2 more, so it should be 27. All right, so I'm actually going to move it over here. 27. All right, because I have 1 more to go to make it a 0. 270. So now I'm looking for the final little bit, which is 45 into 270. All right, well, let's see. If I use my 50 trick, that's going to get me really close. So, but that would give me, I already know that's going to give me 225. So let me just subtract that and see how close that is. All right, borrow, to get the 6, to get the 10. All right, I've got 5. 6 minus 2 is 4. Oh, I end up with 45 exactly. So 5 isn't enough, but apparently 6 is enough. So if I do 6, I get 270 exactly, which would be the end of the road there for me. So sorry because I ran out of space. I'll do better about bringing it up. But 456. So I would have 456 boats per hour. Okay, let's talk about this really quick. I would look for to see if that makes sense, okay, before I move on. So I would say, okay, does that make sense? Here's what I know. I know that 342 boats can be made in 45 minutes. They're asking me if I went another 15 minutes, so it's longer, a longer amount of time, right? So I can do 342 in 45 minutes, all right? They're asking me how much, if we have 15 minutes longer, what would that be? So it would be a larger number, okay? Is this a larger number? It is. This makes sense to me. So it sounds like the right answer. All right. So go ahead and write that down and anything else you need. Pause it if you need to. And then moving on to question 2. Okay, we're going to move on to number 2. And we're going to move a little bit quicker now. Yeah, that first one was a toughie, so I wanted to spend a lot of time on some of this stuff. So, what is the unit price for a pound of cheese if 3 pounds cost $11.25? So, unit price. So that's an indicator. Unit. So, what is it I know? I know 3 pounds cost $11.25. All right. What are they asking me to find? The unit price. Okay, for a pound. So to me that says per pound. Okay. What is not needed? Looks like everything's pretty much needed there. All right. What is my strategy? My strategy is going to be unit rate. Right. So I'm looking for let's see, I'm saying that $11.25 of this cheese, right, cost me, or if there were 3 pounds of it, okay? So I'm looking for something divided by something else. And we're looking for unit price. So that's price per pound is what they're looking for. So I'm going to write that over the side. Price per pound. Okay, because they want the unit rate of the price, not of the pounds. So price per pound, and I know my strategy is divide, right? Because I can cross out per and make that. So basically all I'm doing is this guy right here. 11.25 divided by 3. So let's do it over on the side here. 11.25 divided by 3. Okay, let's put the decimal point up before we forget. All right, 3 goes into 11 how many times? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. So 3. So we go 9. We subtract. We get 2. I bring down the 2. 3 goes into 22 how many times? This is where multiplication facts come in handy. 3 times 7 is 21. So 7 times 3 is 21. I subtract. I get 1. I bring down the 5. 3 times 15, or 3 goes into 15 how many times? Again, multiplication facts. 5 times to get 15. No remainder, so 3.75. Does that make sense? Well, if 3 pounds costs $11.25, 1 pound is going to cost 1/3 of that, right? It's another way of thinking about it. Okay, you can also multiply this by 1/3. But we're going to stick with the simple way. So $3.75 sounds right to me. So you would put in here $3.75. And you could put this little slash per, right? The slash means per, and then pounds you can like that, or you could just write out per, P-E-R, pound. But there you go. So go ahead and take a second to write that down. Pause if you need to, and then we're going to move on. Okay, let's move on to number 3. So it says, a student spends the same amount each week for bus fare. In 5 weeks, he spends $115. Write an equation for this relationship. Let x equal number of weeks, and it says right here, use y equals kx. Okay, so I know we're going to be using y equals kx. What are the things we know? I know I need to use y equals, oops, wrong button. Let's try that again. We know we're going to use y equals kx. We know that in 5 weeks, that seems important, 5 weeks, and $115. We know that x equals number of weeks. Right? These are all things that we know. What are they asking us to find? They're asking us to write an equation for this relationship. Okay? And they're asking us to use y equals kx. What is not needed? Nothing's really not needed. It is important that we know that he spends the same amount each week. That means it's going to be constant. That's an interesting or important word. Constant, right? And we are looking for the relationship using y equals kx. Well, what do we know? What else do we know? We know k is the constant of proportionality. I'm just gonna constant of prop. We know k is constant, right? I think that's what they're asking us to look for, because if y is number of week, or x is number of weeks, okay, if that's x, so x equals, right now x equals 5, let's say, but they're saying that there's a relationship because it changes week to week, then y would be the other number that they give us, which is 115. So x equals 5, y equals 115. is there something else that we need to know? We need to know, how do we find out k? Well, if we used our notes, we would have written down that k equals y divided by x. So that's the constant. Another word for k is the unit rate. So you've got the unit rate, which we've been working on already. We just did 2 questions like that. Okay, so k equals y over x. We know y equals 115. We know that x equals 5. So the next step would be find k. And then we can write our equation. Right now we don't have anything. If we could find k, then we could maybe write out our equation. And the reason they're asking about an equation for the relationship, this is just something you have to remember from what our thing is. They're just wanting to know, how much does y change whenever x changes? Okay, because there's a relationship between the two. So when x goes up, y, something's going to happen to y. What is that? When x goes down, what's going to happen to y? So let's go back to our equation here, and we're going to divide 115 by 5. All right, let's just do it right over here. Oops. 5 goes into 11 twice. 11 minus 10 is 1. We bring down the 5. 5 goes into 15 3 times. Right? This is why I said you didn't need a calculator. I tried to keep things pretty simple. So 23. So we know k equals 23. Well, now all we need to do is replace k with our number, and we have our relationship. Y equals 23x. And remember, when we put a number, anything next to each other like that, like this right here, these two together, that means multiply. Okay? All right, well, is this correct? Well, let's try replacing x and see if we get... We know that if x is 5, that y should equal 115. Well, let's do the math. So I replaced x with 5, so it's 23 times 5. Y equals 23 times 5. So let's do 23 times 5. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 115. So it does work. So I'm checking my answer to make sure it all works. All right, so go ahead and write down anything you need to help you remember this. Pause the video if you need to, and then I'm going to move on. Okay, we're going to move on to 4 and 5. So it says use this graph for 4 and 5. So we're going to do this together. So it says 4, draw a line through the points. Why does this line show a proportional relationship? Select true or false. So that's a clue. Why does it show proportional relationship, true or false? My guess is that these are probably all going to be true because it's saying it's not curved. That sounds like it's proportional. It connects all the dots. Yeah. It goes through the origin. Well, let's check. Let's see what we got. So I'm going to start with this line. I'm going to just draw right through it, okay? I'm going to draw as straight as I possibly can. All right. You can also take a piece of paper and line them up if you want to get a perfectly straight line. But let's go through these one at a time. It is not curved. True or false? Well, mine looks slightly, but no. This looks like it goes perfectly through. So that's true. All right. It connects all the dots. Well, yeah, all the dots are connected. Okay, because if I had like a dot over here, let's just say, just put a dot right there. Would it connect all the dots? No, that wouldn't. But in this case, it does. So that's good. All right, so that's true. And it goes through the origin. The origin is 0. Did it go through 0? It sure looks like it did to me. So it is proportional relationship. So if it came out like this and it went through, like, say, right there, whatever that is, maybe 6 or 7, well, then we know it's not proportional. Okay? So there's 4, and then I'm going to do 5. We'll just keep going. All right, what is the constant of proportionality for the relationship of the graph? So constant of proportionality. Oh, what was that again? Oh, yeah, I'm remembering something about unit rate. Oh, wait, it gives me some sort of formula here. K is the constant of proportionality. So K equals y over x. Okay. Well, what's y and what's x? That's the next thing. So let's just move on to what we know, what they're asking us to find. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my thing here, and they're asking us to find what is. It's usually the word that has what is after it. Okay, so that's usually what they're asking you to find. What is the constant of proportionality? Which, basically, what is that? Right, because they gave us K equals y over x for the relationship in the graph. Well, what do we need to know? Here's something that we do know, or should know by now. Okay, we're looking at a graph. So y is the vertical axis. Okay, that's the one that goes this way. And x is down here, the one that goes this direction. Okay, so looks like labels and time. Although it doesn't seem like we even need to know those, what is what. All right, because they're not asking us any of that kind of stuff. They're just asking for what is the relationship. Well, where is this first little dot? I'm going to just show it in red so that we can see it a little bit better. The first little dot looks like it's right there underneath 8 and 2. Okay? So it's a little less than 8, and x is 2. So let's see. Let's just do 8 and see what we get. We know it's a little less than that. So k would equal 8 over 2, because I can't exactly see what it is. Well, what's 8 over 2 means, remember this line means divide. So 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So it's probably a little less than 4 because the dot is a little less than 8. Is there anything down here that's a little less than 4? Well, look, this is 7. That's way higher than 4. This is double 4. I don't even know where they got that number from. That's really high. 3.5. So perhaps that little dot is 7 because half of 7 is 3.5. I figured out that they probably multiplied 7 by 4 to get 28. So it looks like 3.5 is definitely our best option here. Again, things aren't always going to be super clear, but when you have a multiple choice, you can narrow things out. Okay, so I can cross all of these out because that leaves only one that's close to 4. So there it is. All right, go ahead and write down anything you need to. Pause the video if you need to, and then we'll move on. Okay, on to question number 6. So I'm just going to read it. It says, a gym's membership in 2010 was 8,700. Now it is 6,400. Which expression equals the percent of change? So the big question is, what are they asking us to find, right? And what do we know? What is our strategy and what's not needed? So let's go back. Let's look at what they're asking us to find. So we're going to do that in green. And they're asking us to find this little percent of change. Okay, what is it that I know? Well, I know it went from 8,700 down to 6,400. What is not needed? Well, I don't really need this number. This is just about what year it is. This is not it's not 2010 of something. It's just the year. Okay? And so let's figure out percent of change. So we're going to need to know how to find percent of change. And if you've got your cards, you would know this, but it's going to be difference. Oops. There we go. Divided by original amount. And then in order to make it a percent, I need to multiply that by 100 and then put a little percentage sign on the end. So, difference divided by original amount. So difference is 8,700 to 6,400. So how would I find the difference? That's subtraction, right? So subtraction. So I'm just going to look. Which ones even have subtraction? At this point, I've got this one, and this one. Okay. Then I take that difference and I divide it by the original amount. Okay, so first I can scratch that out. Next thing is to divide it by the original amount. Well, this one, B, doesn't even have division, so I'm going to cross that out. All right, so the next one is original amount. So original amount was 8,700. So which one is dividing by the original amount? Well, this one is dividing by the original amount, C. C is, D is taking the difference and then dividing by the final amount. So that's not what I want. So that leaves me with C. So that would be the expression, okay? They don't put the, they're keeping it in decimal form, so they didn't put the times 100 to make it a percentage. But this is what you were looking for. Go ahead and write down anything you need to help with that. And then pause the video if you need to. And then we're going to go to number 7. So number 7 says, a toy store marks down every toy by 15% in January. How much does the toy cost during January? Use P for the price in December. There may be more than one correct answer. Choose only one answer. So, what is it that we know? We know that there's a markdown, that it's 15%, okay, and that we're going to use P for the price in December. Okay, what are they asking us to find? They're asking us to find, remember when we're looking for a question, so it's the how much. So how much does the toy cost during January? So they're asking us what the final price is. So I went ahead and put this little image up to represent price. So we don't know how much the price is because the price varies, okay? So they're using P, the variable P, for the price because it changes. So they're coming up with some sort of expression to show how to find out what the price of something is. Once we know what the original price was, then we can plug it into this expression to find out what the new price is. So I made this little thing so you can see the little dotted area here. You know, this part is getting lobbed off, right? Because it's going to be a 15% markdown, so it's going to be less. So there's the 15%. I actually have, that leaves me with what over here? That's 85% of whatever P is left is over here. This is the part we're trying to figure out. Okay, I'm going to put it in green here. This is what we want to try and find out. What is this price? So to remember, anytime we want to find the price of, or the percentage of something, we do something, we move, I'm going to show you with 15. I'm going to put 15 right here. And we take the decimal point, right? So it's 15%. We move it 2 to the left to put it into decimal form, and we multiply. So I could do this 2 different ways. I could try and figure out what 15% is and then subtract that amount, right? So I would then cut that out once I find out how much that is. So that would look something like this. I would have my original amount, P, and I'm going to subtract whatever 15% is. And the way I find out 15% is 0.15 P times P, right? That's what that means. 0.15 P means times P. And that is one way to find this out. And that's what I'd be left with. And do I have something like that here? What do you know? Right there. A is there. The other option was, I remember I said that this is 85%. Well, if I'm just trying to find 85% of the original amount, I would do a similar thing where I would just I would move the decimal point over 2 to put it in decimal form, and I would have 0.85p. Is that on here? It sure is. Okay, 0.75p, that would be 25% reduction. 1.15p, that would be adding 15% onto the end of it, because that's 115% right there. So that's not it either. So it's either A or C, or in our case, both. Go ahead and write down anything you need to. Pause the video if you have to, and then we'll move on to 8. Okay, so we have moved on to 8, and I'm just going to start by reading. It says, what is one way to find the total cost of a jacket for $56 with a sales tax of 9%? Write an expression or solve. Okay, so what are they asking us to do? Let's just start with find on this one, because that just seems like a good place to start. They're asking us to write an expression or solve for what? What is the way to find the total cost? Okay, so we're looking for total cost. What is it that we know? Well, we know total cost. We know what? Let's see. We know $56, and we know sales tax of 9%. So our strategies, what do we know about sales tax? Sales tax is always added. It's always added at the end there. Okay? That looks horribly badly written. But so we know we're going to add something. We know what the sales tax is. That's 9%. So our strategy is we're going to be adding 9%. Well, in order to add 9%, we need to find out what 9% is. Okay? So 9%, if we remember, we would do this by moving the decimal point 2 to the left and end up with 0.09. And we would multiply it by the original amount, 56.00. All right? And then we would add it to the original amount of $56. So that's one way we can write it. Okay, we could put that on there. Or we know we're adding 9% to 100% of 56. So what's 9% plus 100%? 109%, or it's written as 1.09. So we're looking for 109% of 56. So we could write it like this. 1.09 times 56. All right? If we wanted to solve it, okay, we would need to do the multiplication out here. All right? And you can do this either way, because multiplication is commutative. Let's see. Hold on. Let me find my eraser. So I'm going to erase something here. So I could do either one, whichever one looks like it would be the least amount of work. So I'm thinking multiplying these two together will be the least amount of work. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. So I'm going to take 56 and multiply it by 0.09. Okay. So I don't need to worry about the decimal place right now, because that's not anything we need to. We'll do that at the end, okay? So 9 times 6. We're going to get 56. If you can't remember what 9 times 6 is, you can think of 10 times 6, which is 60. Oops, I see. Even I did it wrong. Haha, it happens. All right, got the wrong thing. So if you can't remember what it is, you take 10 times 6 and then subtract the 6 that you were working with. So 9 times 6 is 60, and I subtract 6, I get 54. So that's what I meant to write. All right, 54. Put the 5 up there. 9 times 5 is 45, plus 5 is 50. So I got 50. It's not 504 because there are 2 decimal places to the right. Right? So I need to move those back like that. And I end up with, there we go, 5.04. Now, if I'm using this original, I now need to add $56 to that, right? So it's 56 plus 5.04. Well, I can do that math in my head, actually, because 56 plus 5 is 61, and just add another 4 cents. So I could get 61.04. Go ahead and write down anything you want to write down. And pause if you need to, and then we'll move on. Okay, moving on to number 9. We say, what is the annual interest for a principal of $3,500 at a simple annual interest rate of $4,000? So what do we know? Well, we know interest, and we know that interest is a fee paid for borrowing money, okay? So we're looking for whatever that annual interest is. Principal, we know principal is the initial amount invested or borrowed. We know that it was $3,500, and we know that the annual interest rate is 4%. What are they asking us to find? What is, whenever you see what is, that's usually what they're asking us to find. Annual interest. All right, so they're asking us what 4% of 3,500 is. Okay, so how do we find 4% of 3,500? That's something we got to remember. We've had to multiply it by its decimal form, right? So I take 4% and I move the decimal point 2 to the left, 1, 2, to get 0.04. And I'm going to multiply that by 3,500. Okay, so I can do it that way. I can probably going to want to do it the long way, right? So I'm going to go ahead and erase that and do 0.04. 4 times 0, 4 times 0, 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 3 is 12 plus 2 is 14. And then I have 2 decimal places to the left, to the right, so I need to move back to the left 2, and I get 140.00. So the annual interest rate is $140. Does that sound right? Yeah, this is a pretty big number, 3,500, 4%. The other way I could do it is I could find out what 1% is. And the way I find out what 1% is I take 3,500, and 1% is always just 2 decimals to the left. So I move the 2 decimals over and I get 35. Well, now that I know what 1% is, I know what 4% is by just multiplying by 4. Right? So 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. So that was my other way. I can always find 1% by moving 2 decimals to the left. Okay? 10% would be 1 decimal to the left. All right? So that's how we can kind of get there somewhat quickly as well, if you wanted to do it a different way. So I gave you 2 ways to do it. And one you might even be able to do kind of in your head, the second way, because I've reduced some of the numbers and made it a little smaller. So write down what you need to, pause the video if you need to, and then we'll move on to 10. Okay, so the next one says, the price of a $250 coat increased 7% last year. The coat is now on sale for half off. What is the sale price? So we have a couple things going on here. All right. I'm thinking the best thing to do is start with what is it they're asking us to find. They're asking us to find the sale price. All right. What do we know? There's a couple things. We know that it's $250 coat. We know that it went up by 7%. And then we now know that it's half off. So if I think about it, okay, I'm just going to visually show this. I've got $250, right? And then it goes up. All right, 7%. So that's 107% of that, right? So it goes up to 107%. And then it's half of that. So that's going to drop. Okay, so it's going to go up and then it's going to go off. So if I can find, and now we're moving on to strategy, if I can find 107% and just divide it by 2, right, because half off is dividing by 2. I can also multiply by 1/2. But dividing by 2 seems a little simpler. Well, then I can figure that out. So let's see if we can. So how do we find the percentage? We put it in decimal form and multiply. So it's 1.07 times 250. All of that divided by 2. So the first step is to find out what 250 times 1.07 is. Okay? So 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 3 is 17. All right? Move on to the next one. This is all zeros, right? So that's going to be just zeros all the way across. So I'm just going to skip that and move over to this guy right here. And that is, there we go. That is 1. So that's pretty easy, but I need to add the two zeros first, and then my 0, 5, 2. Now I add them together. 1 plus 5 is 6. 2. And how many decimals do I have? I have 2 to the right, so I've got to move it back 1, 2. So I got 267.50. Well, guess what? It's time to divide that by 2. So if I've got 267.50, I'm going to divide that by 2. And hold on, I need to erase a little bit. Make some room here. All right. So to divide by 2, 2 goes into 2 one time. Okay. Bring it down. 2 goes into 6 3 times. Bring it down. 2 goes into 7 3 times, which is 6, 1. Let me put my decimal point before I forget. Bring it down. 2 goes into 15 7 times, which is 14. I get a 1. Bring it down. And 2 goes into 10 5 times, exactly. So now I'm done. My sale cost is $133.75. Take a second, pause the video, write down anything you need to, and we'll move on. Okay, so we are in the home stretch. So 11 says, an object travels 4/5 miles in 1/2 hour. What is its speed in miles per hour? What is it we know? We know that it traveled 4/5 of a mile in 1/2 hour. Okay, so I could write that a certain way, but what are they asking us to find? Miles per hour. Okay, strategy. What's my strategy? Well, let me start by this. I know that I'm dividing miles by hours. So they're saying, here's one way to do it. 4/5 divided by 1/2. What other strategy do I need in order to do division of fractions? I need keep, change, flip. So I do K, and I get 4/5. Change, and I get from division to multiplication, and flip, and I get 2/1. When I'm multiplying fractions, I just multiply straight across. So I get 4 times 2, which is 8, over 5 times 1, which is 5. So if you want to just do that, that could be fine. You can do 8/5 since they're giving us fractions anyway. So we can say 8/5 miles per hour. Or if we wanted to finish this off and put it in decimal point form, we can do this is a division problem, right? So 5 goes into 8 how many times? So we go 1, which gives us 5. I subtract, I get 3. Okay, got to put my decimal point because now I've got to add a 0. 30. 5 goes into 36 times exactly. So 1.6. So the other option is 1.6 miles per hour. Okay. Our other option is to visualize something. Okay. So let's say I go, here's 1 mile. I'm on a line here. Here's 2 miles. Here's 1 mile, 2 mile, 0 miles. So in 1/2 hour, I was able to go 4/5 of a mile. How many miles in 1 hour? That's what they're asking. So that's just one more mile. I mean, one more half an hour, which is the same amount. So I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Where did I end up? Well, each of these is a fifth, right? So I've got 1, then I've got 1 and 1/5, 1 and 2/5, 1 and 3/5. All right? So 1 and 3/5 would be my mixed number. So that's another way of visualizing that, okay? So use whatever way works for you. Write down anything you need to, pause the video, and then we'll do the last question in the extra credit. Okay, so number 12 says, if a person bikes 2.4 miles in 10 minutes, how far can he bike in 1.5 hours? Okay, so what do we know? We know 2.4 miles in 10 minutes. What are they asking us to find? How far they can go, it's the question, right? In 1.5 hours. What is it we need to figure out? Well, if we know how much they can go in 10 minutes, we need to know how many 10-minute increments there are in 1.5 hours, right? So then we can multiply this number by that number once we get it. So how many, let's put 1.5 hours into minutes just to kind of get an idea. So 1 hour is 60 minutes, right? And if I added another half an hour to that, that would be another 30 minutes. So 90 minutes in 1.5 hours. Okay, so how many times is what they're asking. So I'm going to actually write this little thing. How many times does 10 minutes equal 90? Okay, how do we do this? Well, we can just divide 90 by 10 to figure that out. So 90 divided by 10, and the really cool thing is once you get those zeros, you just cross them out. So we've got 9. Okay, so there's 9 10-minute increments. Okay, so we know it can go 2.4 miles in 10 minutes. Now if I multiplied that by 9, what would I get? So the way I'm looking at this is it's 2.4 times 9. And that's going to tell me how far I can go. So let me just do the math here. 9 times 4 is 36. All right. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 3 is 21. So I'm going to do that, 21. And then how many decimal places to the rate do I have? Oh, 1. So I'm going to move that back over, and I end up with 21.6. So it's 21.6 miles in 1.5 hours. All right, so that's the final thing. Go ahead and write down anything you need to, and then pause the video if you need to, and then I am going to go ahead and do the extra credit right now. Here we go. Extra credit says, if you get 11 out of 12 questions in this test correct, what percent correct would that be? So what do we know? We know that we got 11 out of 10 questions correct. Okay? And what are they asking us to find? The percent correct. So, I mean, we could find the percent of change sort of a thing and then subtract. That would be a little bit crazy strategy. But how do you normally see the amount you got versus the amount of questions on a test? Well, I always see them like this, 11 over 12. Well, there's my clue. What is that? It's division, right? We're not in percent yet. We still need to get to percent. We're in a fractional form. So what is this in percent? Well, I would just complete the division problem, right? And then multiply by 100 and slap on the percentage sign. So let's do that. Remember, the top dog goes in the house, right? That's 11. So 12 doesn't go into 11. All right, so we already know that's going to be a 0. We're going to add a decimal point and add the 0. How many times does 12 go into 110? Well, if we're good with our math facts, okay, we know, well, let's just do, what's 12 times 10? That's 120. Well, that's too far. But if I go back 12, that would be 108. So that's where I want to be. So I'm going to do 9. Right? We already know that it's not going to be 10 because that would be 100%. But 9, so 9 times 12, if we know our facts, we said that was 108. We can also do it the long way. So like 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 1 is 10. Okay? So if we've forgotten our math facts, what's 110 minus 108? That's 2. I'm going to have to add a little 0 here, drop it down. How many times does 12 go into 20? Once. Okay, which is 12. I subtract, I get 8. I drop another 0 down. How many times does 12 go into 80? Well, let's see, 12 times, let's see, what's 12 times 6? Let's start there. That would be 70, 72, so that seems about right. So let's do that one, the 6. So we know it's 72. We subtract, we get up another 8, another 80. Oh, I'm seeing a pattern. All right. So it's going to keep repeating the 6 over and over again. All right, so now the next step is, now that I've got it in decimal form, was the times 100, right, which is basically move the decimal point 2 to the right to get my percentage. So if I move it 2 to the right and I get my percentage, I get 91.6 repeating percent. And we can round up and all that if we want to, but let's just leave it like this since it's already precise. That's one of our mathematical practices, is to get 91.6 repeating percent. So that would be that answer. So I hope you found that helpful and that it'll help you with the retake.